Cool. Well, hi. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Grant.
Welcome back to Bethesda on another beautiful day.
And here we are outside.
Yes.
What a lovely
we
day.
thought there is no way we can do this indoors
No.
on the first 75 plus degree day of 2022.
And we've waited a long time.
We have waited a very long time. So, today we are gathering together to talk about the fifth Sunday of Easter. And there are some interesting texts from Acts and a nice praise psalm, Psalm 148. But we're going to focus our time on Revelation 21 and John 13. And I saw a thing today that said, are we really going back to John 13? Is it really Maundy Thursday again? But in some ways, I feel drawn back to that all the time.
And I think it's something that we can never hear often enough. But before we go there, right, I think I should say I'm Pastor Sue Kesterman, and I serve as CEO at Churches United in Moorhead. And this is Grant.
Yes, I'm Grant Vanderford, and I serve as pastor here at Bethesda Lutheran Church in South Moorhead, and I serve as mission developer with a local ministry, a newly forming ministry called Table of Mercy that seeks to walk alongside folks experiencing homelessness and economic insecurity. And so I get to work really closely with some folks that Sue gets to work really closely with, and so we share some of our people together.
Yeah, and we get to work with each other.
Yeah, which is pretty fun.
It is pretty fun.
It's very fun, not pretty
A
fun.
little bit fun.
It's kind of fun.
We have a lot of fun. People
Yeah.
don't know how much
People
fun.
don't know.
They don't
No.
know how much fun we are.
No, that's true.
So shall I read the text from Revelation?
Yes, that would be lovely.
So the second reading is from Revelation 21, verses 1 through 6. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things will have passed away." And the one who is seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also, he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life."
Beautiful imagery. And the gospel reading for this Sunday is from John 13, the 31st through the 35th chapter, 35th verse, excuse me. When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another."
So I'm struck by this idea in John's gospel. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. And I've been thinking about this idea of where I am going, you cannot come. But then it's laid over and against the Revelation text, right? Where the home of God is with mortals,
Yeah.
right? And this idea that where we all end up is at this Revelation text where everything is new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder about the text from Revelation a lot. Especially, see, I am making all things new. We were laughing at the beginning of this and before we even started that it's been a long, long winter. And in the middle of the long winter, it is really hard to imagine this out here being 75 degrees and green and birds singing and grass growing and people walking their dogs and wearing shorts and experiencing what I would only define as life. In the dead of winter, it is really hard to imagine newness again. And yet, it does come. It does come. And we don't have to simply wait in the cold darkness of the season of winter, because the seasons change. And so I wonder about this text where God says, I am going to make all things new. I am in the process of making all things new. And there's hope in that, because we don't have to stay in the frozen cold where we've been. Whether that's the literal frozen cold or the metaphorical frozen cold of our own hearts, broken relationships.
I think the metaphorical frozen cold is even harder than a Minnesota winter, right?
Yeah.
And so, and when we sit out here on this beautiful afternoon, right? Everything really does feel new today. And we know that as the seasons change, a winter will come again.
Yeah.
And there are seasons in our lives where things feel new and hopeful, and then there are seasons in our lives where they feel cold and frozen and like it's going to be winter forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the promises that gives me hope in the Revelation text is this idea that, see, God is making all things new, and making all things new in a way that's more and better and longer lasting than we can even imagine on a beautiful day like today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like better and newer and more hopeful even than a beautiful spring day.
Yeah. I remember reading as a teenager C.S. Lewis talking about the idea of seeing things now dimly in a mirror and seeing things as they are to be. And the language that was used in that piece was about how everything was shimmery and shiny, and almost to the point where you can't even look at it because it's so bright. And it kind of makes me think of this God glorifying God's self. And glory is not something that we speak a lot about as Lutherans, because of the charged nature of the theology of glory that says that things are better than they actually maybe are. We tend to want to follow Luther to the cross and follow Jesus to the cross.
Yes.
But there is still resurrection. Resurrection is the ultimate, and always tied to crucifixion, to winter, to death, is new life and resurrection. And I think that being made new is not something that we're always immediately aware of.
I would argue that being made new is something we're seldom aware of, right? Like, we get so caught up in the presence of our day-to-day lives that we forget about the presence of God in our day-to-day lives, and we forget about the promise of being in a new creation and remaining present in that new creation with God. It's a stunning thing. It just is a stunning promise. And the other thing that strikes me in this Revelation text is this idea that God will be with his peoples, and God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. There's the promise that not only is there new creation, but winter will be no more. The winter of our hearts, and in this new, always new place.
I think the people that we have the privilege of walking with maybe are more keenly aware of the moments of hope than you and I, and people who maybe are not experiencing the depths of pain and the depths of society's dismissal and throwaway culture that we kind of live in. And so I look to some of our friends who live on the streets and who find themselves in the homeless shelter or find themselves sharing food in different ways than simply out of the fridge at home. And I think hearing them proclaim this newness is really important. You know, you and I can preach and talk and exegete and all of these great things, but the reality is that the lived hope of God's people every day, like you were saying, it is all around us. And if we can listen to the stories of people, particularly people who have known the depths of winter, which we all have, except some of our neighbors experience it almost constantly.
Yes, and that makes the hope all the more stunning. You know, some of the most stunning moments in being present with our friends who are at shelter or experiencing homelessness in the community or experiencing those kinds of insecurities related to lack of housing, lack of resources, lack of nutritious food. When hope is articulated out of the midst of that winter, it's so stunning. It's so stunning.
How many times do you have a person that you're meeting with and praying with or talking to who is really struggling, and they say, but it's not going to last? I mean, that is kind of the refrain that I hear almost constantly. It's just for right now.
It's just for right now. And the other thing I hear all the time is, and I know God is with me.
Yeah.
And so often when I hear someone saying that, I think, how can you possibly know that?
Yeah.
Your life is really hard right now.
Yeah.
To hear someone who's in that really hard place proclaim both that it's a passing thing and that they feel like God is with them, that's stunning.
And God makes God's home right here
with
among
mortals.
us, with us, all in this, in the beauty and the winter as well.
Yeah, it's really stunning. And
that is incredible.
Those of us who are privileged to live with a certain amount of economic security or health security or, security regarding our daily needs, I think the hope doesn't feel as stunning because we feel more self-sufficient.
Yeah, self-sufficiency instead of that ultimate trust where Luther talks about that which you fully rely on is your God. So often our God is ourself.
Yeah.
But when you take away all of your self or your ability or your cognition or your intellect and all that's left is simply God, boy, that's powerful.
Strips the illusion away.
It does. Which is
Yeah.
maybe good news.
Maybe. Except we're kind of...
It's going to be hard.
We kind of like to hang on to our illusions, but yeah, it's good news.
I don't know about you, but...
Yeah.
No, I do.
Yeah.
And I think, so the other strange thing about this time of year that I am struck by is the reality that creation does preach.
Yeah.
Resurrection preaches new life, preaches hope, and I don't have to create that. I don't have to create some best practice or best way to take it in. It simply meets me when I walk out the door.
It surrounds us.
Yeah.
On a day
Yeah.
like today.
Yeah.
It surrounds us, right? So maybe that's one of the ways that God makes God's home with mortals, right? Even while we're still waiting, right?
Right.
For everything to be made new. I think one of the ways that God makes God's home with mortals is just in the stunning renewal of creation.
And then the invitation to continue to steward it,
Yes.
to then take care of it, to make sure that it's sustainable, that it's able to thrive instead of just exist.
And not take it for granted.
Wow. Well, thanks for coming over again and hanging out on a nice, beautiful day.
Oh, this is lovely. This is wonderful to sit out here today.
Yeah.
I'm glad
My
we're
head might be a
outside.
little sunburned, but
Yeah,
that's
well,
okay.
you could put sunscreen on there.
Well, I could, but I'm not gonna. So,
Right.
oh gosh. Well, should we say a prayer and
I think
head
so.
off?
I think last time I started and you closed, so let's
Should we switch it?
switch it around.
All right. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Oh, gracious God, we give you thanks and praise that you have made your home here among us mortals, that you sing out through the birds, through the wind and the trees, even through the cars and the dog walkers and your people who are out and about in this beautiful world that you've created. Keep us mindful that you are present, that you make your home here among us, and that you will never, ever, ever forsake us or let us go. You walk with us in trials and in triumphs. Be with us.
Teach us, O God, to have hope and to be stunned by new life, even when we're not in the middle of a winter. Teach us to love one another and to love you and to trust in your presence and your new life in all of the seasons of our life, in the seasons of our world. Teach us to see one another in the ways that you see us, to be with one another in the ways that you are with us, to make our homes with one another out of a sense of justice and love and peace, rejoicing in your presence in all things. And when we reach the end of our journey here in this life, beckon us into the new life where you make all things new. All of this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Even the motorcycles.
Even the motorcycles.